Thanks, Lee. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Dawes. That will introduce me to you, so you can glance at that real quick. I'm not going to go over that in any kind of detail with you right now. But I do want to talk to you about business models this morning. This business modeling discussion this morning uses consumer examples. It's often difficult for a presenter like me to predict the audience and what the audience will be interested in. Cincinnati's been a very sort of consumer tech heavy city for the last few years, but it feels like there's a little transition going on here where there's a lot of med tech and a lot of analytics kind of work going on. So we're going to have to do some translation together back and forth. That's kind of a way of saying that. So very helpful. Business models. Can you guys just kind of yell out whether you think do you think a business model is important? Does a business model raise to the level of being important in your mind? I mean, 1, 2, 3. If 3 is important and 1 isn't, give me just a visual scale. Lots of 3s, couple of 2s maybe. Okay, so let me just point at people and just yell out why. Why do you think it's important? Defining the market? Yes. Okay, good. Yes? You have to figure out how you're going to get paid. Money, monetization. How about you? It helps with execution. My fashion person? Helps with operations and development. Operations and development. In the back row on the co-living? Yeah, I think where to spend your time and resources. Where you spend your time and your resources? Anybody else? Back here in this corner is quiet. What's... To actually make money, yes. Back, how you define your channel. Okay, so very good on that. Now I'm going to start asking a couple other questions. And I know this is like a lot of questions for the audience. Can I see all the people who kind of view themselves as bookish, book readers, read like 50 or 60 books a year? Okay, you're group 1, okay? Second group, collectors, people who have small collections of things and like to finish the collection, who do a lot of collecting of different kinds. Can you raise your hand up high where I can see you? Seriously, only that many people? Okay, you're group 2. Group 3 will be people who are busy, people who are like always busy. You know, your spouse or your significant other, your partner is like, you're always busy, you never sit down, you don't watch TV very much. You're kind of kooky that way. If you could work 2 jobs at the same time and it made sense, you would. Okay, you're group 3. And group 4, arts and crafts people. People who like to make things. You can be 2 things, because you're going to get a chance to choose on this. But you can be 2 things, and it's really cool. If you're 2 things and you're 2 of those things, that's really pretty interesting. But raise your hand high if you're arts and crafts and you make stuff, or I guess you could reinterpret that if you're a guy, if you're a fix-it guy. Okay? All right, so you're group 4. Now, one more raft of questions. Okay, so if I use the term VR and AR, how many people know what I'm talking about? Okay, how many people have worn in the last 6 months VR goggles? Okay, good. How many people own a Tesla? How many people want to get in line for the $35,000 Tesla? Okay. Look around. I want you to see who's raising hand. How many people own a Volt? Nobody. Okay. I'm not going to ask Prius. Prius is old. How many people have competed in a Tough Mudder? Ah, what's that? Listen to you. Listen to what you're saying. Okay, we got one Tough Mudder, and we have half the room saying, what's that? How many people have ordered a Casper or a Lisa mattress? Pardon? You received. So we got one researcher. Okay. How many people know what a Casper or a Lisa mattress is? Okay. How many people are Harry's or Dollar Shave Club customers? Ah, a woman. Very good. I'm so impressed. I'm so proud of you for raising your hand. Blue Apron customers. Okay. So Ipsy customers? Ipsy. You're probably not into cosmetics. How about how many people know what kefir is? Weird? How many kefir users like hearing their kefir called weird? Mine doesn't. How many people have ordered from MyUndies or one of the sock companies that are coming out? Okay. So you all saw how few people raised their hands on virtually every question I asked. And some people raised their hand multiple times when I raised the point. So what's important for everybody in here who's an entrepreneur, and all the entrepreneurs raise your hand, kind of the lead folk, okay? What's important for all of you to realize is if you didn't raise your hand, the odds of you being an early adopter are very low. Okay, so the odds of you knowing how your target consumer thinks about your business as you're starting it are low. Okay, now it's not uncommon for entrepreneurs to not be early adopters. The problem arises when an entrepreneur thinks they're the target consumer. Okay, and this is important for B2B as it is B2C. It's a universal statement. Okay, and it doesn't have anything to do with your likelihood of success. So I'm not critiquing you, there's no critique. It's just you as the CEO make all kinds of decisions every day about how you operate your business model based on what you believe is true about your target consumer or customer. And if you're not an early adopter, the odds of you knowing how they think are low. And how they think means what their decision tree is, what's important and what's not. And what's important if you're an entrepreneur is that you develop a sensitivity for that. Because ultimately you or somebody who works with you very closely, shoulder to shoulder, has to really be your version of the target consumer. You have to understand it that deeply. That's really important from the point of view of success. And it's important from the point of view of understanding the likelihood of success of your business model. Okay, so does that raise any questions in anybody's mind? It's a very interactive presentation, so please raise your hand if you have a question. Does that raise any question in anybody's mind?
Why you said that the CEO thinks that they're...
It's dangerous when the CEO, who is not an early adopter, thinks they're the target consumer, or thinks they deeply understand. We could rephrase it 2 or 3 ways. Thinks they deeply understand the target consumer. They will get there, but it's probably not instinctual, and it's probably not intuitive. Okay? It's an important thing to kind of grapple with. So, those of you who kind of reacted to my questions about business models being important for channels and being important for understanding the architecture of the business, the operations, help you understand the marketplace, all the answers to all that is yes. You know, they're important to all that stuff. Business models, when they get to being sort of representative of the successful business, that's a post hoc thing, right? That happens after you figured it out, not before you figured it out. So part of the job of entrepreneurism is to iterate through and figure out what business model you need to build your business. So it's we're trying to open the scope and open minds here about business modeling and how it works. Does this page look familiar to people? The sort of background, okay, you know what this is. This is the business model canvas, okay? And it has come through books like this. The business model canvas, I would throw a caution out about it, having done business modeling for a lot of years and for a lot of different reasons. Business model canvas is business 101 for people who've graduated from MBA school and are now starting to implement what they're doing in the real world. Okay? The more important business model is your P&L and balance sheet. Okay? That's the graduate, this is the graduate course in business modeling, right? Understanding the P&L and the balance sheet, that's important because that's the real life set of transactions that wind up reporting back to you on how well you know what you think you know. Okay? I'm not going to do P&L and balance sheet. Okay? I'm going to come at this from another point of view, but I want your awareness as a consequence of this to be raised to the point where we're thinking a whole lot more about P&L and balance sheet and projections, those kinds of things, than we are thinking about business model canvas, because that's scopy and fuzzy and that kind of thing. So the bottom line on a business model is when it's perfected, when you've sort of thought through how it works, and particularly for an entrepreneur entering a crowded marketplace. Do any of you feel like that is a picture of who you are and what you're trying to do? Are you an entrepreneur entering a crowded marketplace? Yes, yes. I see you thinking about it in the back row. Don't think of it as specific to your subset. You're talking about fundamental apartments, right? That's a very, very crowded market. You need to think about it at that scope, not the very narrow scope. So if you're entering a crowded marketplace and you need to find a success model, understanding the business model, working with the business model can actually create barriers to competition. It can create barriers that make it difficult for large incumbent companies to compete with you. One of the things that you'll get asked quite frequently is, can somebody do what you're doing? Can they copy you? Can they do these kinds of things? Those are always very hard questions to answer. The truth of the matter is, if you've perfected a business model and what you're doing, it's very hard for even an incumbent to compete with you because you understand the variances in your model better than they do, and it would take them years to be able to figure out what you figured out. So really working on a business model is really helpful, really. So this is sort of Clay Christensen's chart that begins to explain the differences between new entrant business models and incumbent business models. And I think the thing to grasp from a chart like this, that this chart, how many people look at this and are confused by what this chart is trying to do, right? It's kind of, Clay Christensen's an MBA business professor from Harvard who developed this thinking. Fundamentally, what he's trying to tell you is that incumbent businesses spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to make incremental improvements. Okay? So what you're doing is you're competing in the innovation space, and you're trying to come at it with fundamentally a better mousetrap. And you're competing against incumbents who've been there for a long period of time. The reason they've been there and been successful is because they've gotten successful at satisfying more and more and more needs on the part of their target customer. So what they constantly look to do is make more money on the next innovation than they made on the last one. Okay, so that pushes them toward perfecting the product and cost reducing it. The more they do that, the more stress it actually puts on the customer, because customers don't get as sophisticated ever to the degree that businesses can perfect their products. So the more they make it sophisticated, the more they create opportunities for us, because we're the great simplifier. Okay? And so the thing that you need to think about as you develop your business approach is, how do you maximize the simplification that you created? Let me do a pause and ask if that makes sense. To protect the simplification, right? Because I see heads nodding, because you're like, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I see. This is what I'm trying to do with my innovation. You're trying to hit the sweet spot in the market and take advantage of the space that's been given to you by incumbents who have gotten way more sophisticated than the consumer actually needs. Okay? So there is a way to do that, and that's what this session is about. There's a way, yes?
That performance line that consumers can actually use, is everything above that line a sort of waste?
Yes. Yes. He's talking about this space right here.
Yes.
Right? That's the gap that increases over time as the incumbent company continues to perfect what they do. And that creates an enormous space here, which the creative, progressive entrepreneurs in the audience see and have the opportunity to take advantage of. And the question is, how do you do that? How do you get sort of feedback from customers? How do you know that you're doing the right thing? How do you know that you're talking to the customer that's actually interested in that simplification? Because there are lots of customers who think they want this, right? Because that's what gets marketed to them. That's what they get told, so they think they want that. There are customers down here who are not getting served. These are your targets, okay? And the few people who raised their hands as early adopters, right, remember? Raise your hand if on 2 or 3 of those things I caught your attention. These are the people who are sensitive to that difference. Because these are the people who gravitate to new things because they're dissatisfied with what's going on. Okay? You make sense? Okay, good. So, my argument to you, the thing I want to pass on, the thing I want to teach this morning is the job to be done. Are you familiar with hearing this idea of the job to be done? Okay, the job to be done, developed by Clay Christensen, it fundamentally asks what the customers actually want, what the consumers actually want. And the argument is they're actually hiring a product to do a job. Okay, and the reason he's using the word job is because job is multidimensional. It's not just functional, right? And that's the important thing for us as entrepreneurs to get, because that's what's making you uncomfortable in your gut. The job is more than features and functions. It has 2 other dimensions, and we're going to talk about those other dimensions. But I want to unpack that so you guys begin to get a chance to see what those other dimensions are and why they're important. Okay, so the way I like to talk about jobs to be done is I like to talk about them in 3 dimensions, and I like to kind of put the notion of a job to be done in a sentence so we can sort of begin to remember that sentence as we're looking at our product and see how our product sort of unpacks itself against the sentence. And a consumer fundamentally says, I want a thing to do an X in a way that Y so that Z. Okay? That sounds just as fuzzy as you can imagine. Okay? So fundamentally, they want the features and benefits, which is X, so that they can do things with it, which are the Y, so that those things will actually enable the next level up, the next greater expression of who they are or what they want to do. And the reason I say who they are or what they want to do is on the consumer side of this, it's who they are, right? It's kind of the social phase. If it's on the B2B side, it's what they want to do, but it's a larger context. It's a competitive context. It's a larger competitive context. So, if we look at the job to be done for a drill, this is the way we might unpack a drill, right? X down here, I want to hang my pictures. Okay, so I need a hole maker, right? So to a consumer who has a simple set of needs, and recall, we're back, I don't want to page back, but if you remember the space we defined, the more sophisticated the drill gets, the more it appeals to fix-it and maintenance and builder nerds, and the less it appeals to simple consumers who need holes. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to do is sort of unpack this in a way that causes you to think differently about products, okay? Now, you want to do it in a way that, and let's just talk about that. I don't want to ask for help, right? So you need to make me a hole maker that enables me to do it without asking for help. So I can be an amateur and I can feel successful. It needs to be easy, and I have a bunch of stuff that needs holes, so make me a really reliable hole maker that I can use all over the place. Okay? And then the end goal is I want to make my house beautiful. So I want to use this hole maker all over my house so I can hang stuff on my walls and really be happy with it at the end of the day. And there you get battery-powered, small gun-shaped, or pencil-shaped drills. They come with 2 bits, they're very simple, they drill holes, and you're done. And you sell a zillion of them. But that's versus Makita and all these names that we hear about today with very expensive drills, with cases full of drill bits, and all kinds of complexity. Now, I'm not saying you're all trying to do the gun-shaped or the pencil-shaped drill, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm trying to say is the target consumer that's going to help you get your business started because they are ready right now to abandon the Makita. Okay? Because they don't even want to shop for the Makita. Right? They want something to jump out off the store shelf at them and say, I'm simple and easy, I'm going to buy that, and I'm going to move on. Okay, so that's the mindset I'm trying to create here a little bit. Now, there's the consumer mindset side of that. The other side of that is the entrepreneurial side, which is, how do I have to think about this? Because now that I'm thinking about my product differently, I start to worry about how good does that thing need to be. Because I'm building something that doesn't necessarily currently exist. I need to think about how good it needs to be because I've got to be able to afford to start this business. Okay? So there's a good enough principle. And it's really pretty simple. It's really pretty powerful. It's really iterative. It's really freeing. It'll excite you, it'll make you happy, but it'll make people who don't understand how to do this nervous. But you don't have to worry about them. You're the CEO, it's your company. Okay? The principle is it needs to be excellent where it must be and good enough where it can be. All your product has to do is make holes. It can be a very rough product if it makes holes and fulfills the other requirements of simplicity. It doesn't have to be state-of-the-art design for beauty straight out of the box. That actually can come later. It doesn't have to anticipate every single use the current drill satisfies straight out of the box. It has to make holes. That's it. Okay? That's all it has to do. But if we think back about are early adopter consumers, and I'm going to ask you guys to raise your hands again. The early adopter consumers, raise your hands. Come on, put them up high, because people need to see this. Look how few of them there are. Okay, so when you start making your good enough product, they will pay more for it. They will help you get the business started, but you will run out of them quickly. Okay, which means you need to go to the next group, which has a higher order set of needs in order to begin building your business. So you need to improve it. That's how we get on that curve that creates sophistication and opportunity. So fundamentally, it's impossible to avoid that curve. Okay, you can grow a business a long way before it becomes being detrimental. Okay, but it's important that you understand the difference between where your product needs to be excellent and where it needs to be good enough. Did anybody in the room, just as a cross-check on this, happen to buy a Pebble watch, a Pebble smartwatch? I did. Anybody else? Anybody else buy an Apple Watch? Okay, how about the first fitness trackers? I mean, you name it. The first ones, not like one yesterday, but the first ones, okay? We know all of those had problems. Pebble had problems, iWatch had problems. The first fitness trackers had problems. They didn't have the full feature set that you expect today. That's the good enough principle at work, right? The Pebble watch was really, I mean, you would have to agree, it's really kind of ugly, right? But it was the first smartwatch that was kind of viable. And so there are many, many indications of that. And so if you're an early adopter, you're used to seeing the kinds of trade-offs we're talking about. If you're not an early adopter, one of the things as a CEO, this whole thing is going to make you nervous about is you're used to seeing the perfected thing. Okay, and so your thought process is going to drive you immediately to perfection, which is a whole lot of expense and cost and increased risk for your business. Do you follow what I'm saying? Does this make sense? Yes, ma'am.
One thing early on that I discovered in the development. Okay, thank you. So one of the things that I discovered early on in the development of my collection was it's like trying to figure out where do I change the product and where do I change the language.
Right.
And so that has actually been a constant challenge in the development of our product, because it's like, you know, when I first say, yes, this is an infinity scarf that blocks electromagnetic frequencies, I lose people at electromagnetic, and they're like, what? I don't understand what you're saying. And so I'm like, okay, like, how do I, like, dumb the language down a little bit to get to a level where it's good enough and where the consumer can understand exactly what it is and what the benefits are. And so that has been a challenge for me. And if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. And it seems like overly simplistic right now, but she walked right into, there's a statement here at the end of the presentation that fundamentally says copy is everything. Okay, you know, so startup entrepreneurs, even in the medical space, right, you've got to learn to write about your product in a way that investors and buyers understand it. And what happens is we tend to discount that, or we tend to outsource that to agencies and other sorts of people. And there's a danger in that, and the danger is the loss of understanding of what you're trying to do along the way. There's also a danger in that people who don't understand what you're trying to do will default to making it look pretty rather than making it intuitively understandable. And as startup CEOs, where you need to be is making sure the communication is crisp, intuitive, and clear. And again, the thing that will distract you if you find yourself not an early adopter and you're up on that perfection curve, is crisp, clear communication looks like really sophisticated communication to some people, which is your EMF problem, okay? The consumer who's dissatisfied with that stuff and wants the new thing, is ready to actually pay more to get it, has a different approach to thinking and buying. And you really need to unpack that. You need to find out what they think. So spending time with them, understanding how they're responding, what language they use, what language comes easy to them is super important.
So I'm trying to grasp this mentally. So you have this gap here. If this gap is not big enough, there's no market for.
Well, yeah. No, actually, okay. So that's a super good question. Yeah, that's a graduate course level question. He didn't realize it at the time, but that is a super good question. So fundamentally, when you're in markets where there isn't a big gap, you're in an early phase of the market. Okay, a market that is still, there is still a battle going on for control of the market. And so what the market hasn't decided yet is who got the job right. Okay? So what you're going to find if you really start mucking around in those things is her point. The language isn't clear. It isn't crisp. The way the product is architected and designed against the good enough principle isn't right yet. And I would argue the VR market's there right now. Okay? The virtual reality market. Nobody wants a big, clunky headset, right? Anyway, so that's the thing. So the battle you're in is not a battle for sophistication and perfection. It's for getting the job right. Do you see what I'm saying? That's a really important distinction, and that's like an 800 level course, right? But that's it.
Well, I was just thinking like, so you have a product that is already owned by a big company. It's sleek and simple. It does what the customer wants it to do.
Right.
There's no room to go, like, trying to think. And like something like, it may be a little cumbersome, like PayPal or something like that. Like a big company that does processing like, or Venmo, that's owned by PayPal. Something that
Bitcoin.
Yeah, or Bitcoin.
But it ain't perfected.
Right.
Right. So the point I'm trying to make to you is even underneath PayPal, there is, because time marches on, there is a gap. Right? And the current argument under PayPal is Bitcoin. Okay?
That undercuts.
Yeah.
It has a potential.
And Venmo is still making its case. Okay? These things don't happen in 6-month periods of time. These things happen in decade-length periods of time. Okay? So this hurry up and get it done sense that we all have is a little bit of an illusion, and does a little bit of damage to entrepreneurs because they all think they have to get it done right now, and there really is more time to play. What they really need to be focused on is getting the job right. So when you take apart payment systems, you want to look at what banks are doing, because banks are getting creative payment systems. You look at PayPal, you look at Venmo, and you look at Bitcoin, and you start saying, what are the consumers saying about what they need to have happen with payment that is currently not available? Okay, and not the sophisticated, right? Not the sophisticated ones again, the simple ones, except in the place of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's like Tesla. Bitcoin's coming backwards through the system rather than forwards. Tesla came backwards.
They have blockchain already.
Okay, which is, I was afraid somebody was going to ask a question like that, because there are outlying examples where they actually go backwards. But the bulk of them go forwards, and you're dealing with a consumer with a different need. Bitcoin's going to enable voting. Bitcoin's going to enable payments across international borders. It's going to be a global economy thing, right? So there are a lot of, you just got to change your mindset in a lot of different ways to be able to think about what these things do. And we're back to what? You see where we come back to every time is our mindset, and it's who that target consumer is, and it's why I started out with you guys saying, be careful thinking you're the target consumer. You may have an idea that appeals to a target consumer and really want to work on it because you've got the background, technology, understanding, etc., which is all good and important. But be careful thinking you know who they are, right? You've got to really dig around in that. Yeah.
All right, my issue is that I'm not creating a product, I'm just enhancing a better service. So how do you think outside of the box to make sure that you're providing your customer what they need?
If you're thinking, if your business is an improvement over an existing system, you're actually in a situation where the odds of success are low. Okay, and it depends on how tuned in the incumbents are to the needs of the consumers that you're serving. Because if they're tuned in and you're doing an improvement, they make their living on improvements. Right, so the odds of them saying, look at what she's doing, she's appealing to these consumers, I can make these 3 changes and do that, are very high. And they will. You know, as time marches on, technology gets cheaper, the speed with which they can adapt to what you're doing gets faster and faster. So what I would encourage you to do is look at what you can do that's different, that appeals to a consumer that's overserved by the current market. The current market is missing their needs. That's my talk. That may not fit what you want to do, but that's the point I'm making for entrepreneurial success in general. Entrepreneurs can peel off pieces of markets. It does happen. It's just hard and expensive.
I'm just going to say one element that you didn't talk about necessarily was that often the early adopters are also key influencers. So their impact
Right.
to you long term from your business isn't just their volume that you sell to, but they're the ones who get the word out and can actually be your ambassadors of your
They can.
thing.
Yeah, she's very right. Thank you very much. Yeah, they are loudspeakers. They are, and if they travel in packs, there's usually 1 in a pack of 10, and 5 of the 10 look to them for guidance on what to buy. So that's really important. So I wrote this a long time ago. This is the job to be done I wrote for iPod, okay, when iPod was new. And it's just really vastly different than anything that was competing in this space at the time. Now, iPod today seems like ancient history, but the job is kind of helpful. Because what you're doing, when you look out at the audience of music lovers, there are a lot of people who are music lovers. So is that enough? No. It's music lovers who want their music to be mobile. Okay, so the current system didn't really, even these cassette recorders weren't helping with mobile people. There were some early MP3 players, but using them was a nightmare, right? Getting music up and down from those recorders was a nightmare, so it had to be simple, right? So you've got a music lover who wants mobile music and wants it to be simple. Okay, and the 4th ingredient is cool, right? One of the things that caught everybody off guard was the importance of cool, and so the importance of design in iPod. And so what I just took you through is, functionally, the more music it carried, the better, because it had the music collection. It could fit a mood. The second thing was it needed to be mobile. It needed to address their moods. This is the personal level, so we've moved from functions to the personal level. At the personal level, it needed to be simple because the last thing they're going to do is struggle with it. Okay, the minute you struggle with it, you put it back in geek land, and then you're in a whole different set of products because you're in geek land. okay? And the third thing is cool. And why is cool important? Because cool is the way I project myself socially, right? So if you're dealing with hip people, you're projecting yourself socially. So the interesting thing that Steve Jobs did when he launched the first iPod is he came out with a white unit. Immediately after he came out with a white unit, you may not remember, but he came out with a U2 unit. And so fundamentally, U2 was the it band when iPod was launched, and he got, to your point, he got Bono to sell it for him. Okay? Bono said, this is hip. This is the way you do it. And it worked great. It worked great. Now, iTunes itself is not a simple, is not an inconsequential piece of this whole thing. But iTunes fundamentally destroyed the current record industry, right? The current album industry. And this is what I'm telling you about business models that protect what you're doing and challenge the norm. People really didn't want to buy 12 songs at a time. For a long time, they really hadn't wanted that. They had wanted to take albums apart and just buy the songs that they liked. And so Steve Jobs was fundamentally saying, I'm going to give you a way to do that. And that's what iTunes was. And he made it dead nut simple. So the iPod fundamentally, which is now iTunes, which is now in every iPhone, which is, right, it's universal. It sort of is a great example of the three levels that we're talking about and the simplification that goes on with a really good job to be done. You fundamentally get a whole stereo system that is mobile for $199. Who doesn't want that? Right? Think about that point in time. Who doesn't want a whole stereo system for $199? Now, on the good enough principle, if you think about at the time, the performance vector, or imagine it if you weren't there, what do you think they were all working on trying to do with music at that point in time from a performance point of view? Say that really loud. Say it really loud. Right. Okay? So what they did at the time, I have 10 minutes? Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you were doing. Okay. So, sound better, right? So, truth be told, the iPod didn't sound good, right? And so Jobs, as a billionaire, or at that point, 100 millionaire, had all the resources he needed to spend, all the money he needed to spend to make iPod sound great, and he knew he didn't have to do that. He knew all it had to do was sound good enough through the earbuds, right? He knew the touch wheel was important, he knew the quantity of music on it was important, and he knew getting it on and getting it off was important. And he's literally that much of a simplifier. So I would say to you, even those of you who are doing medical sorts of projects, it's that kind of thinking, that kind of sort of rabid dedication to simplification is what differentiates what you're trying to do from the crowd. It's really understanding the good enough principles, and I think your investors will respect that, because I think they see a lot of other sorts of projects that bring so many variables into the startup equation at once that they actually amplify risk. Okay, so to get the iPod off the ground, if he had spent years and years perfecting this thing, somebody would have gotten there first, it would have been insanely expensive, and the risk of success would have been very, very high. So that's kind of what happens behind the scene on that. And the answer is yes, he thinks that deeply about it. Right? The successful ones do. The guys who are starting Uber, the guys who are starting eBay, the guys who are starting Etsy, Pinterest, the whole thing, they're thinking about it. When you meet them, and I've met a lot of them, they really do think about it this deeply. They really get off on thinking about it this way. So it helps. That's again why I'm letting you off the hook. I'm saying you don't have to be the target consumer. You have to do so many other things, right? You don't have to be the target consumer, but your chances of success increase dramatically if you're thinking about it at that level of richness. So, what we did is we went through.
Mark, can I
Pardon?
ask you a question?
Sure.
Can I ask a question? So, with the announcement of the HomePod that's come out just in the last couple of days,
Oh yeah,
so
it's a speaker.
interesting, right? I mean, because like you said with the iPod, they were not the first MP3 player. So this is not the first product like it in the marketplace. What's your initial opinion on it? Because the price point, the feature set, and whatnot, and how do you think that's going to compete in the marketplace?
I've lost my North Star. Like when Steve passed, it's a little bit harder for me to read Apple than it used to be. I think people don't know how to think about it yet. And I think the thing that Apple's done on the HomePod that's different than what they've done before, Apple was super slick in the past. What they would actually do is announce it to their bloggers and their critics 6 to 12 months before the launch date and let the internet go batshit, right? If you remember all the other iPhone launches and all that other stuff, you would know about the next iPhone 6 to 12. Do you know why they did that? Why do you think they did that? Feedback. Great marketing, feedback. Why? Because they were still developing the feature set. Right? They're that good, they're still developing. It's what you guys have to do too, right? It's the same thing. It's trying to figure out what good enough's going to be for this new iteration, right? What's good enough, what's not good enough, what's important, what's not, what's too complicated, what's simple, how do you communicate about it? Did you have a question?
I think it's interesting because I read the announcements about it, and it's not going to be good till December, number one.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Number two, their focus is on the quality of music. I mean, that's really how they're positioning it to the market. And the reality is, all these voice digital assistants our whole world is moving toward that, and it's not about the music necessarily as much as it is about how we interact with computers. So I don't get it. I think that, like you say, I think Apple's kind of straying from some of Steve's or loss of leadership.
Yeah. I mean, it is early, but with the pipeline, the size company they are today and the pipeline, you really got to go into production for Christmas pretty quick here. Yeah.
So the whole idea then is you just have to get the idea correct, and you just have to do that good enough.
Right.
That's it.
No,
Well, and then you incrementally get towards excellence as you move ahead.
Yeah, so you have to understand that if this is our product, this is an idea. It's not a thing, right? So get the thing out of your mind, right? This is an idea, and it's an idea on 3 levels.
Your solution.
Yeah.
You get to the solution.
This is your solution, right? And this has 2 dimensions. One's excellent, the other one's good enough, right? The odds of this needing to be beautiful from a design point of view are extremely low, right? It's just not a public tool. What it needs to do is connect up with that thing dependably 1,000% of the time. And it needs, in my hand, it needs to be simple and intuitive how to work it, so I don't have to spend time thinking about it. But the odds of it having to be beautiful are relatively low. And the odds of it needing to have 200-yard range are relatively low, right? So think about what kind of effect those 2 things have on the cost of the thing you're making. You see what I'm saying? It's unpacking all that. Yes, you could put 200-yard range, but the odds of a speaker being 200 yards away from the presentation are pretty low.
It's just like having the requirements in the scope. You don't want to go beyond
Right.
your edges.
Right. Okay, so so why did I spend so much time on this, right? You know, we've got lots of different kinds of business models. Why did I spend so much time on this? The reason I spent so much time on this is because what's really important from the point of view of architecting your business model is really understanding how you're constructing this, right? How you're meeting the needs of your target consumer. And then you take that expression one more step and you say, based on who that target consumer is, how do I need to put my operation? Who said operation? Somebody said the business model is the operation, right? How do I put my operation together so that I reliably deliver this, right? And so how do I put the operation together so that every contact my customer has with me, it communicates what I'm trying to communicate, right? It backs up the design fundamentally of the job to be done of the product, right? It's for those of you who are worried about monetization, it's, you know, kind of what are the financial boundary conditions the customer or consumer lives in? Can they take it in a SaaS model? Can't, you know, which iPhone's fundamentally getting to. Do they need to pay for it one time? Is there some way to get it to them directly that's better than getting it through a two-step distribution channel? Right? You know, it's who talks to them and how do they talk to them. It's, do I use live customer service staff, or can I get away with an automated or digitized customer service staff? Because those kinds of things make a difference, particularly if your target consumer has questions. And the things you need to understand are the target consumer always has a ton of questions at the beginning. But that's okay. That's the good enough principle. They know that. They expect that. What they want is the benefit you're about to give them. They're willing to invest, you know, personal time and effort in getting it. That trade-off is where they live. And that's good. Future generations, much less so. But at the very beginning, very important. So all these decisions, market size, market penetration, blah, 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 all that stuff has a relevancy to your starting point on a product. Okay, and you're fundamentally architecting it from there. So that's why I started here. Because what I find with entrepreneurs, many of you are converting an idea into some kind of manifestation, whether it's a digital manifestation in software or a physical manifestation, whether it's in the medical business, whether it's an analytic product, all of those kinds of things. You will go through this, and so the important thing is understanding how they get it, how they need to get it in a way that simplifies it so that they can get it and have a good positive experience, so they can kind of fall in love with what you're doing. And what you'll find, or what we find even in the medical business, because we do, at a Clean City, we do investments in the medical business, is that some of these things work just the same way. They have a completely different language set, but the kinds of hurdles you have to cross in terms of advanced clinical testing and articulation of feature and benefit, of how it works, backing your product up, who's representing it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, has an enormous impact on the target consumer. You know, we could talk kind of endlessly at this point about pluses and minuses. Some people make hard things, put it through two distributions. Some people think that they're going to make something and have reps sell it. Okay, I don't know if any of you are to that point yet, but there are reps who rep fashion. We'll talk about that for a second. The question is, can a rep firm that serves multiple different brands represent a fashion brand that includes technology? Will they do that, right? Is it simple enough for them? Do they have the mindset? Do they get the job to be done? Do they understand the good enough principle, right? Do they understand how to do that so when it gets into customer interaction, they can represent you properly? And the same is true with the folks who are in the medical field. It's what's the sales force? How does that work? How does that get set up? You know, what level of training can they represent your new idea in a way that gets it sold properly? I think you're working on an analytics product might be sold digitally. For you, copy is everything, right? Back here with the co space, really understanding social trends and where, right? Where the people are who are likely to gravitate toward that sort of lifestyle, super important. You know, you're going to get pushed to being very broad very quickly, and you're going to have to push back and say, oh, no, that's not the way this works. I need to find pockets of these consumers who are going to take this up. Otherwise, your cost of acquisition is huge, right? Your cost of acquisition. So that's the translation of all the things we're talking about here. You're acquiring customers and you're acquiring consumers, and there's a cost to doing that. That's why I put you back in the P&L and balance sheet and take you off the business model canvas. You see, if you're living on the business model canvas and you're not crystal clear on the cost of acquisition and how productive that is, the rate of acquisition, then you're not targeting your business properly, and you're not going to generate the profits that you need to continue improving it and building it and growing it. So that's why I took you off the business canvas and put you on the P&L and balance sheet. Right? That's why I'm talking about the job to be done and the way the job to be done migrates over time. You know what? Going back and talking about that, we saw the iPod first. Who bought just the iPod? The first. Anybody buy just the iPod? Who came into this at the Shuffle? Who came into this at the Nano? Okay. Who came into the whole thing, didn't come in on that end, didn't come in until it was an iPhone? Okay? So the job for the iPod is different than the job for the Shuffle, then is different than the job for the Nano, then is different than the job for the iPhone. The iPhone is a starting over, okay? It picked up some of what was brilliant about the iPod in the App Store, but it had terrible what? Okay? He did not vary from that. He did not spend enormous amounts of money making that the best cell phone possible. He made it the most usable app smartphone possible. Yeah.
So when you said that it goes from the iPod to the Nano to the phone, what happens to those other? Are those just completely obliterated?
No.
They're not available anymore.
No, most of them are still available. They've just changed, right? Thinner, smaller, more capacity. The market size virtually goes away.
Yeah.
But as long as you can still make a good profit making them, and see, the thing that changes is when they age off, you don't spend advertising money on them anymore. Okay? And so when you take advertising money out of the picture, you get a whole bunch of operating profit back.
So it doesn't matter. Your sales can grow.
Right. And this is why this conversation, I know this part of the conversation is techie and boring. Okay? No, it's okay. This part of the conversation is techie and boring, and I know that. Okay? But this is why getting off the business model canvas and on the P&L and balance sheet is important, and why they're important to your business model, because you have to be smart enough to say, I've stopped spending advertising dollars on this whole line of stuff, so am I making money? And at the end of the day, if you're making as much or more money on those things as you're making on your new stuff with advertising, why would you cancel them? You see what I'm saying?
When you said it goes from the iPhone, does that mean that gap shrinks once again, or is that just a new innovation that starts up?
You're talking about cannibalization and incrementality, right? That's a whole nother math problem. And the point is, nothing goes away, everything exists together, but you have to think about incrementality and its P&L and cannibalization and its P&L. And I just can't do that right now, but that is the right question. That's the 900 level class. So what sort of questions are on your mind now? I know we've kind of ranged over this subject, and I know I've made it kind of academic and kind of long hair, if you will. Are any of you kind of sitting there, gosh, I wish you would just answer a simple question. I just have a simple question. What are those simple questions? What are the things that you wish you knew that we might be able to spend the last 5 minutes of the presentation on?
I have a question. And Mark Dawes, since you started talking about our clothes, why do you need protection from electromagnetic That's interesting.
Because the electromagnetic frequencies that are emitted from your electronics, from your cell phones, from your microwaves, from your refrigerators, over time, it's been shown can cause tumors and cause cancer. It can make you lethargic and decrease your level of concentration and focus. And so there's a lot of studies going on right now. For example, in France, they've banned all electronics from elementary schools because of the high rates of ADD that they're seeing and autism. So there's a lot of difficulties that can stem from long-term exposure to low EMFs. So infertility, I mean, the list goes on. So
Right, and again, you know, it's what you're going to see is it's target consumer, right? So there are a set of consumers that are worried about those things, that are going to be willing to pay more for those clothes than they pay for other clothes because it satisfies that need.
So I kind of tied it all back together because when you said that at first, I thought it was because I want to block electromagnetic fields. But you said copy is everything. You said you have to sell Infinity Scarves that block electromagnetic fields. That's great copy for me. Because I want to buy a blocker. So it goes back to that job to be done. Like,
Exactly.
If your job to be done is that you are a wearable that blocks electromagnetic fields and you happen to be a scarf, that's intriguing to me. You're a fashion company that's selling just a scarf to protect you to be warm. I'm not going to care about the electromagnetic field.
Right, exactly, right? And the thing is, would you have guessed that he was a target customer?
yes and no.
Yeah.
We've created it in a way that it's unisex and you can wear it in many different ways. So because of the fact that we've
So
seen,
your challenge is going to be not confusing people.
right, that is a big challenge.
Okay, and for CEOs, again, well, this is a consumer product, but it's the same problem for all of you, right? She's trying to compensate for anticipated criticism by developing a product that's more attractive. The problem is some of that, I'm going to use him, but you can use anybody, any of your target. Some of that they don't care about. Okay, and the more you focus your copy on all the things, the ways of wrapping it, the less of your copy will get spent on explaining what it does. Okay, and your chances of reaching him go down. Okay, which does what? It takes your acquisition cost up. It takes the period of time to reach the target consumer up because they have to find you. So, you know, this is a slim example, and you may be sitting there saying, geez, thank goodness I'm not selling fashion that'll protect you from electromagnetic frequency, but you're all selling something that has a set of trade-offs, okay? And that's my message today, right? My message is be really aware of the trade-offs and make sure that you understand who that target consumer is, whether you're it or not, okay? And that you write about it in a way that they will hear you. Okay? The other thing I can tell you about target consumers is they read. They get turned off by just pictures. Okay? So you were going to, and I need to be done here in a second. So,
Can it just be clothing that improves your health? I mean, can it be so simple?
odds are the early ones need to hear some form of EMF. So, in some form. Now, I don't know what that form is. I can't write copy like on the stage, right? But they probably need to, there are probably signal words, which is what we're getting to, right? There are probably signal words they need to hear in order to get it clear. Yes?
So one of the comments you made, this may be a longer conversation, is that as entrepreneurs we have this fire, right? We think we've got to move really fast. So what is the, how do you know what the right pace is? Because I know I'm in a market now that's becoming saturated. Because everybody's going after this market.
She's asking about pace. I think the way I would reframe your question a little bit, and I think we as entrepreneurs need to crowd together and realize fast for what. Okay? It's not fast for fast. It's fast to get the job right. Okay? So what you want to set up is an ecosystem for yourself that lets you iterate to getting the job right first. And then you expand that thing. Okay? So the degree to which you can go to an investor and say, listen, I've got the job right. Here's my evidence, okay, that I've got the job right. Now I'm ready to expand, and here are the set of experiments I want to run to expand, right? Then you're tackling the right speed problem. Okay? Scott, am I finished? Okay, I'm finished. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.